Serious, teachers of Reddit, did a student ever offer you sex to pass a class? If yes, how did you react, and what were the further consequences? No. I instill respect and integrity in all of my students. Even if they were failing, they would never accept a passing grade when they knew they should fail. It has nothing to do with me being bald and overweight and old. Female university professor for 16 years. I've been flirted with countless times, but only outright propositioned twice. Neither time was for grades, as both students were already doing well in class. One was a 19-year-old boy who told me that he was sure he could handle a 30-year-old woman. I managed not to laugh at him, mainly because I was very fond of him. Of course, I turned both down. No consequences to them. Faculty member for 30 years checking in. Usually it starts as a subtle suggestion or innuendo. I play dumb, then document the hell out of it in an email to my department chair, the dean, and the sexual abuse coordinator. We are in a state that allows recording, if only one party knows about it. In my office I do have a webcam and microphone that can be triggered subtly. However, most of these initial feelers happen outside my office. And of course my door stays open, and I never cover the window. Edit. Just for the record, I'm overweight, bald, old, and wear glasses. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen. I have had friends who had their careers ended or disrupted by false accusations, so I take all the precautions I can. Using my squeaky clean alt for this one. I teach math at a major US university and usually end up with at least one lower level class each year. Like most of the replies in this thread, I have students flirt or make subtle comments fairly regularly, but one student really went above and beyond. She was doing poorly in my class with about a 65% average early in the semester, but she was coming into my office hours regularly for help. She was really trying, but was still struggling with the material. I really wanted her to do well, because it was clear that she was willing to put in the work, so I didn't mind the extra time. She was a very attractive young lady and always wore tight or revealing clothes to my office hours, but that was how she seemed to dress normally, so I didn't think anything of it. She didn't really flirt much, but there were the little hand/arm touches from time to time. I kept my office door open and was on a busy hallway, so I didn't really worry about it. Well, toward the end of the semester she shows up for office hours and asks if she can charge her phone. She didn't have a charger, she said, but she had a cable, and could she just plug her phone into my laptop? I didn't think anything of it and said sure. She got fairly flirty that session, and was starting to cross into inappropriate territory, but I played dumb, and kept things focused. When we wrapped up, she unplugged her phone, and said something, like I think my phone copied some pictures to your computer. Tell me what you think. Oh boy, did her phone ever copy some pictures. There were literally hundreds of pictures of her which looked to be taken over the course of the semester, almost all of them nude. I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a good long look at them that night before I deleted them. I'm only human. I had to report it to my department chair, but I told and that I'd like for us to assume it was an accident, but I wanted cover too. We had a meeting with her, and she was embarrassed, but we stuck to the "it was probably an accident" line, and left her most of her dignity. Surprisingly, she didn't drop. Instead, she apologized after the next class, very embarrassed, and promised it wouldn't happen again. I continued to let her come to office hours for help, but we sat in a common area instead of in my office. She ended up pulling a C-, which I bumped up to a C, because of the extra work she put in. I would have done the same for any student even without the pictures, so I figured it was only fair. She made a mistake, as many college kids do, and I didn't think I needed to punish her anymore. And just to be clear, she was 20 and not at all underage. I checked as soon as I realized that she could have put child porn on my laptop. I used to teach an astronomy class which required the students to once a week, weather permitting, go outside for 2 hours to the campus observatory and point out constellations and look through the telescope. One girl in my class was pretty clever overall. She didn't like working particularly hard, so she always sat with the nerdy awkward guys who easily did all the work. She was reasonably attractive and playfully flirted with them enough to get them to basically do all her work for her. Having been in their situation in college, I quickly recognized it as an instructor. One day she asks me if the observatory would be open, to which I responded, I don't know, because it was the middle of the day. She then sighs and says, maybe we could meet up at my place tonight, get a movie, and determine my grade some other way. Well, me being the suave physics grad student that I'm, just stared at her expressionless, turned, and quickly walked away to the other side of the room. As I was walking away, I start hearing the guys at the table jump in on this offer and start planning to bring food and movies, as they figured this was an open invitation to the table. I have no idea what happened. I've been a college instructor, teaching assistant, or professor for 10 years. I'm extremely oblivious, so I don't typically realize I'm being hit on until a month or two later. Semester ends, I'm in my office thinking of the past semester, saying man X was friendly, she sure seemed nice, but she always wore low cut tops and oh my god. And then the realization sets in. I'd never act on it. Most of the ones who like me are way too young for my taste. I go the opposite direction, much prefer older women. But I'm completely oblivious. Quick edit, there's also the clear ethical violation there too. It would be morally repugnant. Spent a year in Teach for America after college. Taught in a pretty tough location and had a bunch of students on the line. One day, I'm sitting in my classroom, grading papers, and one of my students comes in. The innuendo was pretty severe. I immediately reported it to my principal and to the guidance counselor that was in charge of the student in question. She was removed from my class the next day, and we had a follow-up meeting, myself and the principal, about a week later. After that, the girl always gave me a look in the hallways. Yes, this absolutely happens. I occasionally teach at the University of Mumble, adjunct faculty, and most years I've taught at least one young woman has tried this trick. They generally don't realize that A, most of us professors simply aren't interested in the multiple ethics violations, and B, they're way too young to be interesting anyway. The first one was the most memorable because I wasn't ready for it, and it was rather shocking. A slender young woman with black hair came into my office hours and shut the door. Unusual. She was wearing no bra and a very sheer buttoned shirt that revealed her jutting, and reached across the desk to touch me a couple of times. She stood up to get her textbook out of her book bag, and when she turned around she looked slightly different. It took a few seconds to realize she had unbuttoned a couple of buttons on her shirt when her back was turned. She trotted out the old line that she'd do anything to improve her grade in this course, astronomy, and put her hand on mine. I suggested she spend more time on her homework, and she packed up her things and left. I spent the rest of that office hour. Hardly anyone ever turns up to office hours, musing about just how desperate someone would have to be to make an offer like that. There were no longer term consequences. Since then I've been propositioned a few times. It's just part of the territory. If you teach a large enough class at a state school, there'll on average be a person or two who's willing to try the gambit. It's sort of sad, really. Every young woman who tries it must think she's hot stuff, but in the moment such an offer is just sort of a sad admission of failure and low self-esteem. I can say that I have never had a student outright say anything sexual. I had a young female student tell me that she had pictures of me on her phone, and then she winked at me, and I had a few passing notes about how much they were in love with me. With that being said, I do not respond to anything like that. I just ignore it and remain professional. I've seen other teachers who will respond to that stuff and change grades or show general favoritism to the students because they like the attention. Those teachers definitely get labeled by the other staff and the administration. Another thing that I make sure of is that I'm never ever alone with a student in a classroom one-on-one. It can be difficult and sometimes impossible, but it is important to try and not get in that situation. This kind of because a lot of students open up to me and feel more comfortable discussing issues with me because I'm a young teacher, 25, but I can't always give them individual attention because of the possibility of accusations. I do always make sure they get any help they need. After one exam, one of the students emailed me saying that she knew she had done poorly and she was willing to do anything to get her grade up. Didn't even see it sexually at all until I casually mentioned it to my family at Sunday lunch. My mom said something like, "Dumb, that's a sex offer." I was like, really? My wife just rolled her eyes at me. Didn't mention it again. Neither did she. I actually had to change careers because of how often it was happening. I said no every time, as I wouldn't risk losing my career, but then my wife left me after 10 years of marriage. I became fairly lonely and didn't think I could say no when a very attractive student became overly friendly with me. For both our protection, I ended up quitting and becoming an author full-time. I was a college lecturer for 3 years in the States, during which time I was in my mid-20s. I was still young when I started, and close enough to the ages of most of the students on campus, so I made a rule to never get involved with any student, so long as I had a say in their final grade. My second or third semester of teaching, I had a young woman in my class who began making heavy advances towards me. Whether it was for a passing grade or she simply wanted the D, I never found out. She would constantly make advances and would often throw me dreamy eyes and subtly lick her lips around me. I ignored it for the most part, but once she started making sexual innuendos to me in front of other students, I went straight to the department chair and told him what was going on. I was pretty worried about some allegations flying around before I spoke to him, but he assured me that I'd done the right thing, spoke to the girl, and that was the end of it. Was still awkward as hell around her until she graduated. I teach a course on computer basics. It's for corporate, to keep the older employees up to speed and help them have greater efficacy over their work. I issue some small quizzes in order to cement their knowledge. You can't actively fail them unless you go out of your way to try to flunk. Example, one of the questions is a picture of the Windows 7 desktop and I ask them to circle the start button. I'm also going to add in the fact that I don't look my age. I'm in my mid to late 20s, but I still look like I finished college yesterday. I get mistaken for a temp, intern or summer student a lot. Anyways, I had this one older lady who kept shilling out her daughter, 18 years old, to me. First she'd complained during the lunch break about the loser she was dating, the fact she isn't going to school and doesn't have a job, the fact she doesn't aspire to anything. Then she started saying how alike we both were and had the same interests. We are both good with computers. Finally, I got one of the quizzes back from this lady with no questions actually answered, just a letter reading that she'd like me to make the first move to talk to her daughter. The back page was her daughter's phone number, email and Instagram, actually Snapchat, but good hustle. Closing line of the letter really killed it. Basically that she'd heard her daughter is amazing in bed and a winking face. Didn't even touch it. From the stories I'd heard from her mother, low hanging fruit. Female faculty here. When I was a graduate student, there were a couple of female faculty who would sleep with their male students, but the academic culture has changed so much in the last 20 years that that's more rare, or at least more hidden. When I first started teaching, I used to get hit on quite a lot. I have had male students bring me coffee, cookies, and gifts from their travels. Male college students are never aggressively sexual, just needy and crushy. I learned to deal with the attention by being either highly intellectual, so distant, or highly maternal, thus gross. As someone who chaired a department, I must say that female students are extremely aggressive sexually with male professors. I have had to deal with the most blatantly aggressive female students outright harassing male faculty. Male students don't have anywhere near that level of confidence when it comes to hitting on professors. Maybe there is a longer history of male profs sleeping with their students, so maybe that's why female students feel so comfortable hitting on their profs. The female ones are also rather shameless. They will hang out the prof's office, leave notes, call, and just signal to the world that they are interested, which seems crass to me when a 22-year-old is acting like a 13-year-old at a Justin Bieber concert. Older faculty said that this more sexually aggressive female students is somewhat new, like in the past 20 years. I think colleges/universities should teach professional behavior to students. Honestly, do the students realize what kind of job recommendation a chair might give a student who has spent years in college flirting with faculty?